how to create and update a database on your shared hosting service like Bluehost, HostGator, HostGator, and any other shared hosting service out there starting now. Today we're going to pick up right where we left off in our last video, where we created a database all from scratch using PHP and SQL on our locally hosted WAMP server. But today I'm going to show you guys how to make these files work when you actually upload them online and tie them all to your domain. If you missed that last video, I'll leave a link up top and down below right now. First, what you want to do is navigate to your hosting service account here. And in my case, I use HostGator, but this is going to be exactly the same no matter what hosting service you're using, so don't be worried about it. What we want to navigate to first is our cPanel to make sure that we actually, in fact, have a shared hosting service. So I'm going to click cPanel. So on the right side of your cPanel, it's going to say shared IP address. If it says that, like it does for me here, that means you have a shared hosting account, which means you're sharing that server with other people out there in the world because you don't have your own dedicated server. If you do have your own dedicated server, the code from the last video will work perfectly fine because you will be able to create databases and tables using PHP directly. But in our case, because we have a shared hosting service, it's not going to let us create a database from scratch in our PHP like we did right here. And then it's not going to let us create a table from scratch like we did here in our PHP code. For now, we're going to leave this alone so we can use some information from that later. But now what we want to do in our cPanel is go down to PHP MyAdmin. What this is going to do is it's going to show you all your databases if you click this plus button on the left. And if you click on databases up in the top left navigation here, what you're going to notice is it's not going to let you create a database here. And that's going to be a big difference if you're used to working in the WAMP server or even AMPS, because in the locally hosted PHP MyAdmin, if you go to databases here, it will let you create a database. But now we have some different restrictions, so we have to find some new ways to maneuver around these restrictions from our hosting provider here. So what we want to do is go back to our HostGator PHP MyAdmin, go ahead and close that out, and then what we want to do is navigate to MySQL databases, and here it's going to let us create a new database. And for any database that you create in a shared hosting service, it's automatically going to put your user ID in the front here. If you don't know what your user ID is, it's going to be displayed here, and you can also find it back in your cPanel underneath current user here. And it's going to do this specifically to make sure that every database has a unique name because you are using a shared server. So they do this to prevent you from creating a database that's the same name as somebody else's database. So now what we want to do is go back to our PHP code and actually find what our database is called here that we created. So we're going to select practice here. We're simply going to copy this because we don't want to have to change this later on. And we're simply going to put practice right here. And now it's going to display as Thomas K1_practice. And then what we want to do is go ahead and create that database like so. Now it's going to say added the database. And now we want to go back. We want to scroll down. It's going to give you the option to modify your database in case you ever need to, or even repair your database here. And then what we want to do is scroll down, and you guys will now see that our current database, Thomas K1_practice, is showing up. But you can see over here underneath privileged users, we have 0 privileged users. So nobody is actually able to log in and do anything to this particular database. So what we want to do is scroll down and add a user. So in this case, I'm going to add a user called trial because I want to show you guys how this works. And then we're going to add a password here. This password, I'm simply going to make Kalman Web Design for this video. By the time you're watching this video, this database will be deleted anyways. So this is just going to give you an idea on what it needs to look like. So once we do that, we have our password written down somewhere and we know our username. Go ahead and create user like so. And now it's going to say that we created our SQL user. Now we want to go back here and we want to scroll all the way down to the bottom to where it says add user to database. This is going to be how you add a privileged user. So in our case, we want to click this drop down and go select our trial user here. And then we want to select the database we want to give them access to right here by going down and selecting our practice database and then select add. Here it's going to let you manage the user privileges. In our case, we want them to be able to do whatever they need to do. So we're just going to grant all privileges, but know that you can change these later on. And we're going to hit make changes. And now we're going to have a privileged user in our practice database. So if we go back and scroll down, you're going to notice that our practice database has one privileged user right here. And now we have our database, but we don't have our table. So what we want to do is go back to tools here and then navigate back to PHP MyAdmin. And here, if you click the drop down again, you're going to notice that our practice database is right here. And from here, it's going to let you create a brand new table. So what we want to call this table is exactly what we already have in our code. So we're just going to call this customers like so, and then we're going to head back over here and add our table name here. And in our case, we only have 4 rows, so that's perfect. You have more than 4 or less, you can change it with this little increment button right here. We're going to go ahead and hit create. Now what we want to do is add in our database table columns. So if we go back to our code real quick, you can see that we have a name, a phone, an email, a user message, and they're all varchar 20 values here. So we want to go ahead and start adding those on this end. We're going to go name, then phone, then email, and then user message. And you want to make sure these are exactly the same. Then we want to change our types all to varchars, and we want to specify the length here, all going to be 20, just like we have in our code. We don't need to specify anything else, but if you want to auto increment any of these columns, you can add that option here. If you want them to be null, you can add these options here and a few more options as well. Now we're going to go ahead and hit save. And what this is going to do is it's going to run our SQL to create this table. So now if you guys look at your tables, we do in fact have our customer table. Go ahead and click on that. So in this page, you're going to be able to see all of your columns. Okay, we have name, phone, email, user message, but we don't currently have anything in them. So now we want to go back to our PHP code and start making our edits to what we have from last video. What we want to do is navigate to our test input function here, where we clean up some of our input values, Control X that, and go all the way to the bottom and paste this here just so it doesn't get in our way. Next, we want to scroll back up and we want to find this bracket here, and we want to Control X that. This bracket is the ending bracket in our if server request method equals post. And the reason we need to Control X this and move it down is because we need that if statement to encompass all of our database connection and queries here. So we're going to go right before our test input function, add it here, and then go ahead and hit save. Now what we want to do is scroll back up to our database connect variable here, and MySQL connect. We still have localhost and root, and then nothing for our password. And now we're actually going to need to specify these values. So localhost is going to be perfect. Then username, we're going to need to put our username in right here. So we're going to delete that, go back and navigate to our username. So if we navigate back to our current users, our username is going to be thomask1_trial. We want to copy that and move it over to where our username needs to go, paste it there. And if you remember, our password for this particular user is going to be Kalman Web Design. So we're going to specify our password here. Next, we actually need to specify our database that we want to connect to right here. So our database again is going to be thomask1_ practice like so. So we have our local host, and if localhost doesn't work for you guys, go ahead and put your IP address here. Now we have our username and our password and our database name, and make sure you guys include the prefix of your user ID here, and then trial, and then our user ID again here, and then your database practice right here. And as you guys know, we already created our database and our table, so you're gonna notice that we don't need this code anymore because we don't need to create our database if it does not exist. So we're gonna go ahead and delete that. And then for our database name variable here, we wanna go ahead and add our prefix again. So Thomas K1 underscore practice, so we can make this work. Table name is still gonna be customer, so we don't have to change that at all. Now we need to go down and where we create our table, if it does not exist here, we can get rid of that code because again, we already have our table created. Now what we want to do is go ahead and save our page, and we want to upload this file through an FTP to whatever domain that you guys want to use. And in our case, we're going to be using kalmanwebdesign.kalmanwebdesign.com. If you guys need help uploading files to your server with an FTP, I'll leave a link up top and down below to that video, but I'll get back to you guys once I have my files uploaded. Now you guys can see that we are able to look at our file online at kalmanwebdesign.kalmanwebdesign.com. Now what we want to do is fill out our form so I can show you guys that this will in fact work. So now if we hit submit, it's going to submit our form like so. And now if we go back to PHP MyAdmin, what we're gonna do is go ahead and refresh PHP MyAdmin here. And once this refreshes, you're gonna be able to see now that we do in fact have our user inputs stored within our database on our hosting service where you guys can access these at any point. This will work for as many times as you want, so you can store as much user data as you need to store here. I hope this video helps out. If you guys run into any issues, reach out to us through this video or go to our website at kalmanwebdesign.com and we will help you out. Thanks for watching.